Welcome back again to Joe Stunner Boxing. Once again, apologies for my voice. I have a stinking cold. One of my subscribers said it sounds like Gareth A. Davies has punched you in the nose. Only if he had egg weights in his gloves. Never trust that Gareth. Evil man. Anyway, let's go on to the 5 versus 5, shall we? Because we're going through those and picking winners, doing predictions and so on. Excuse me. And today I thought we'd have a look at two of the heavyweights because there were two heavyweight matchups. Zhilei Zhang versus Deontay Wilder, which is actually, I think it's now taken over as the headline card because of the pullout of Artur Beterbiev against Dmitry Bivol, which is a great shame because I think we were all looking forward to having another undisputed world champ. This one at light heavy, but it wasn't meant to be. But we've also got Daniel Dubois against FILIP HRGOVIC. This is an intriguing matchup because you've got two guys who, I suppose you could say, one has promised, or flattered to deceive almost, promised more than he's delivered. And another guy who was being fast-tracked as potential heavyweight world champ by Queensberry, and hit a few bumps in the road and has some question marks over his head that in his last fight he partially answered but hasn't fully answered them. So the first of those two examples would be FILIP HRGOVIC, who is listed at 31. He's had a hard life by the looks of things. 6'6" guy from Croatia, from Zagreb. Currently 17 wins with 14 KOs, no draws and no defeats. Turned pro same year as Daniel in 2017, and was being thought of as really an extremely, I suppose you call him a gilt-edged prospect. He was regarded as one of those guys who was in waiting, shall we say, as for that status as potentially the best heavyweight in the world. Hasn't really panned out for him. At times he's looked very impressive. On other occasions he's looked less than impressive. But if you look at the quality of his opposition, now he had a 12-round unanimous decision over Zhilei Zhang in 2022 August, which was, with the benefit of hindsight, isn't bad. Not a bad result to have. He went on the floor in the first round. Was that counted as a knockdown? I can't even remember that. But at times, Zhang definitely was getting the better of FILIP HRGOVIC. HRGOVIC, on the other hand, had very good skills, as does Zhang. And I think people overlook the fact that Zhang has very good boxing ability. But HRGOVIC was at times able to outbox him. So that shows the pedigree of HRGOVIC, the level of his skills, that he was able to keep Zhang at bay and actually contain him. And then, of course, we know about Zhang's gas tank, which is terrible. Probably his conditioning and his age doesn't help. But in the second half of the fight, HRGOVIC was sort of took over. And in my opinion, he deserved to win that fight. And I actually thought he would stop Zhang before that fight, I thought, because I was sort of low on Zhang because I thought, the Jerry Forrest, was it a draw that fight? Oh, I can't even know, wasn't it? It was a win, wasn't it, for Zhang? But it was very controversial. And I just remember thinking, it was a draw, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a 10-round draw. And Zhang had Forrest on the floor a few times, and then Forrest got up and Zhang was hanging on at the end. Yeah, I mean, that sums up his gas tank, although he did say in that fight he was unwell, very unwell. He went to hospital afterwards. So, okay, in the case of FILIP HRGOVIC fighting Zhang, yeah, he was the beneficiary of the second half of that fight when Zhang just appeared to sort of, as he always does, just slip into this mode of just being out of puff, out of energy. And that remains probably FILIP HRGOVIC's best win, I think. He did beat Dempsey McKean, who was undefeated at the time in 22 wins, no draws, no defeats. McKean is 33 years old. He's from Australia. Big lad, 6'6". But he gave even though he was undefeated going in, he was a rank underdog, and he certainly gave HRGOVIC far more He asked far more questions of Hrgovic, gave him far more trouble than most of us thought he would. This was another fight where I thought, oh, Hrgovic gets him out of there in the middle rounds. Not a bit of it. In fact, Dempsey McKean hung on until the final round and got stopped with a handful of seconds left or whatever it was, or a minute left, or whatever it was. Anyway, he got stopped in the final round. Now, apart from those names, I mean, the last fight, the McKean fight was in August of last year. And then Hrgovic had this absolutely pointless fight against Mark de Moray where he knocked him out in, I don't know what it was, minute and a half, something like that, in the first round. Everybody I know won money on that, including myself, because we all said first round knockout for FILIP HRGOVIC. Don't know what the hell de Moray was doing in Riyadh as an opponent. Maybe he had the right connections. Maybe he's promoted by the same people that promote Opatire or whatever the reason. He ended up there. He picked up a paycheck for his pains. But if you take out Zhang, maybe McKean, who's not great, is either. You know, we got the usual suspects for Hrgovic, like an 8-round decision over Kevin Johnson. Eric Molina, I think he did it with 3 rounds. Rydell Booker, who's really was a light heavyweight, I think. Back in the day, I remember him fighting James Toney before he went to prison, losing on points. Hrgovic stopped him in 5 rounds for whatever reason. The middle-aged Booker. And he's now calling himself a heavyweight. But there isn't really anyone there. So I suppose, you know, Hrgovic's best win is going to be the Zhilei Zhang unanimous decision, which, like I say, I thought was a deserved win. Then we come to Daniel Dubois, who at the moment is 20 wins with 19 KOs, 2 defeats, both by stoppage. 26 years of age now, 6'5", from London. And the 2 defeats are what stand out immediately because they were both by stoppage. And they both involved Daniel quitting, essentially. Now, the first fight, the first defeat, the Joe Joyce defeat, was at the back end of 2020. He took a knee, had a busted eye socket. I'm not someone who would come down heavy on him for that. Prior to that, he'd been destroying sort of C- C-level fighters. He had a pretty good win over Nathan Gorman, who at the time was undefeated. Knocked him out in 5 rounds. That was for the British title. He won the Commonwealth against Ebenezer Tete, who was undefeated at the time. But again, both Gorman and Tete had, you know, glossy records, but that kind of belied the level of their actual ability. And then he bumps into Joyce, which was a quantum leap upwards. Too much by far. But the fact he went 10 rounds with Joyce, he fought part of it with a busted eye socket. I wouldn't come down too hard on him for quitting in that fight. If you've got a busted eye socket, maybe discretion is the better part of valour. He then rebuilt, went over to fight on this bizarre Don King show with Trevor Bryant, who was undefeated in 22, knocked him out in 4 rounds, picked up the WBA, what's it called, the regular title, or the hell bloody thing is. I don't think he got paid. He's a Don King card. You ain't going to get paid, are you, for Christ's sake? Then he defended it against Kevin Lorena, and that was alarming. That was really alarming because he was on the floor 3 times. Supposedly, he was injured, but knee injury, I think. But he got up against Lorena, who is I'd say a competent cruiserweight, or if you want to include Bridgerweight, okay, maybe. And he stopped him. He stopped him in 3 rounds. The next up with Alexander Usyk, you might have heard of him. And there was this sort of fake controversy about a low punch. Was it or wasn't it? In my opinion, it definitely was a low punch. And Usyk ended up, again, forcing Dubois to quit after 9 rounds. Now, I think in this instance, Dubois got lost mentally and emotionally. And he just got bewildered by Usyk. And in the end, he kind of had the fight knocked out of him. Dubois seems to me, I mean, he does have that man-child image. And I remember thinking, he's going to unravel unless he's been given specific instructions. He's going to unravel. He's going to mentally unravel. Sure enough, he did. But, as we say, defeats don't necessarily define a career unless you let them. This was over in Poland, which is next door to Ukraine, so it was a sort of semi-homecoming for Usyk. And we know about Usyk's fight, the Fury fight, undisputed and all the rest of it. But nevertheless, there was a huge question mark over Daniel, even though he's only 26, which is young for a heavyweight. Nevertheless, people thought he ain't going anywhere. When the going gets tough, he'll roll over. Which brings us to his last fight, which was in December, right near Christmas, 23rd of December, I think it was, last year, against Jarrell Miller. The infamous Jarrell Miller, who's failed more tests than you can possibly count. Doesn't look buff anymore, he just looks fat. All 333 pounds of him, whatever it was when he came in. And Miller had been making fun of Dubois and saying he was going to expose him. Miller, another undefeated fighter, 26 wins, no defeats and 1 draw. And it was intriguing because after about 4 or 5 rounds, I'm thinking, this is only a 10-rounder, but I wonder if Daniel's going to make it, because he was beginning to look a little bit, maybe not sorry for himself, Daniel, but there started to be that look of someone who was having their energy drained by a much bigger man who just wouldn't stay out of his face. My God, 333 pounds is big. But to his credit, Daniel held it together mentally and was able to ride out that mid-round storm, come on strong, and he actually stopped Miller in the final round, the 10th round, with about 8, 9, 10 seconds left, whatever it was. A very, very late stoppage. And in a sense, that was redemption for Daniel, at least partially, because he proved he can work through a crisis against a very big, powerful and physically powerful man and get the win. And that will have done his confidence no level of positivity, because having quit twice, the first one understandable, the second one showed maybe a mental fragility. This time he didn't quit at all. He kept punching, he kept coming through it. In fact, Daniel wanted the HRGOVIC fight. He was saying, yeah, I'll have HRGOVIC. He starts getting lippy now. He's like a kid who was, shy and quiet and, and suddenly, he gets a bit of confidence and he wants to take on the world. Having said that, should we read too much into the Miller fight? Probably not, because Miller's Miller, serial cheat, and but a very big, powerful, physically strong man. Took his lumps, Miller. I'll tell you what, I'm reluctant to say it because I don't like the guy, but he took his battering in that fight, and yeah, the referee stopped it eventually, but Miller didn't punk out. I mean, the bully actually showed some big bollocks, you might say. But when you put Dubois together with HRGOVIC, who have we got? I mean, it's a difficult one because there are a lot of intangibles involved. If you go back to HRGOVIC, first of all, they're both orthodox fighters. They're roughly the same height. HRGOVIC, older by 5 years, better amateur career, or more renowned amateur career. Daniel turned pro when he was very, very young, about 19, I think. But there is a feeling that HRGOVIC has been overrated all along, and I'm one of those people that happens to think that. I think he's a good heavyweight, but I never quite bought into the idea that he was the face of the heavyweights, the future face of the heavyweights. So it hasn't entirely surprised me that he's looked a bit hot and cold. Dubois, I was mildly surprised that he came through that little mini crisis against Jarrell Miller. I was someone who was thinking there's a very, very serious question mark over him. Although if you look at the Lorena fight, when he was injured, he actually battled through that considerable pain to get Lorena out of there. And he's done some decent travelling. I mean, the Usyk fight, even though he got knocked out in 9 rounds, was to Poland. He beat Trevor Bryan in the United States in that bizarre fight. So, and I think travelling is is very, very good for any fighter. For any fighter, I think it's very, very important. You know, you get your experience by traveling a lot. It's very, very good. Very good experience. As we said before, there is no substitute for experience. You know, for experience. So who's gonna win? Who's gonna win? So many unknowns, so many intangibles. But to be honest with you, I've got to stick with the guy who I have a little bit more faith with in terms of the mentality and in terms of overall skills, being able to box on the back foot, being able to counter punch, being able to be offensive but in a controlled manner, not a reckless manner. And that person is FILIP HRGOVIC. This is a 12-round fight. I don't know whether it's for one of those alphabet soup belts, you know, the Intercontinental bloody whatever the hell it is belt. I've no idea. But I favour HRGOVIC over 12 to survive some scares. I think he'll have to start with, maybe for the first half of the fight, he'll have to box and not get reckless at all, because Daniel can whack hard. But overall, I see HRGOVIC taking over in the middle rounds. Maybe round 8, round 9, maybe, and then turning the screws on Daniel and stopping him in about the 10th or 11th round. I think it'll be a late stoppage. 10, 11, 12. I'll go for. I always like to pick a specific round. I'll go for around 10. What the hell? Or 11. No. I'll go for 10. I'll go for round 10. So I think HRGOVIC wins this. I think Daniel will be. I think he's got a little bit too much savvy, a little bit too much nous for Daniel. Daniel will be a threat. Daniel will land those hands at times and might even buzz HRGOVIC. He does hit hard. And I don't think he'll quit. I think it'll be maybe Don Charles, who is that necessary father figure in the corner for Daniel, the one who does direct him, that face that Daniel trusts, that comes when Daniel comes back to the corner. He knows that he's going to get some solid, sincere advice from this guy. Again, we're talking about one voice in the corner, which is very, very important. I don't think it will be quite enough. I think HRGOVIC, I think Don might throw the towel in the 10th or 11th. I'll tell you what, shall I change my round to number 11? What the hell? It'll be 10 or 11, you know what I mean? But I think Daniel will be rescued very late against HRGOVIC. But I think, strangely enough, his stock might actually rise in this. I think that might be the case. So what do you think? Leave your comments below, and please tell me who you think is going to win and why you think they're going to win, how you think they're going to win. And then, we'll see what happens, won't we? All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to reading your comments. I always appreciate you watching these videos. Hit the like button if you could. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe and spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. Much love to all of you. Get you later. Bye for now.